Hello, everyone. It is our pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Honeybee A to Z. Today's workshop is part of the Arts Integration webinar series, The Science Around Us, presented by Southern Utah University and Weber State University. My name is Tamara Goldbogen, and I'm the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Endowed Chair in Arts Learning and Director of the Arts Learning Collaborative at Weber State University. Also hosting today is Elisa Peterson.
I am Elisa Peterson from Southern Utah University, where I direct the Arts Fusion program. I am also the Endowed Chair, Beverly Taylor Sorensen Endowed Chair of Elementary Arts Education.
Before we jump into the webinar, I'm just going to cover a few housekeeping items, introduce today's presenters, and briefly go over the schedule. If you need any tech support during today's webinar, we're going to put a phone number and an email into the chat right now. You can get in touch with Sam Steffen, and she'll be able to help you. That will go in right now. There you go. There's your phone number and email for tech support. We suggest that you view today's webinar on a laptop or a desktop for the best viewing experience. We will give you a little heads up again, but you can always adjust the window sizes by using the slider in the border between the shared presentation and the presenter boxes. At the conclusion of the webinar, we'll provide you with a link to the survey. When we receive your completed survey, we'll email you a certificate of completion for your relicensure points. And over the next few days, we will add you to a Google Drive folder that will contain today's presentation and other great resources. We are recording today's webinar, and when that is ready, we will add it to the Google Drive as well, so you can have access to that. Please, today is a great day where you'll be working alongside the artists, so don't forget to gather your materials for today's webinar. The list is in the chat. We really do want you to work alongside our presenters as they demonstrate many different arts integrated activities and approaches to exploring bees. We want to make sure that you have a copy of the hexagon book template printed. Feel free to start cutting that out so that you're ready to go for that activity that Elisa is going to lead us in a little bit later. All right. So for our presenters today, we have a lot of people on the line. You've met me and you've met Elisa Peterson. Dr. Amy Miner will be joining us from In Focus Education Group. Dr. Adam Johnston, also here at Weber State University. Samantha Steffen at Weber State University, and Kelly Bruce Glenn from Utah State Board of Education. We have a full packed 2-hour webinar for you today. We're going to start off. Dr. Amy Miner will highlight some of the seed standards for us and make connections. Adam Johnson will share some science of bees with us. Then Elisa will lead us through creating a hexagon book. I'll show you how to make a bee puppet. Sam Steffen will go over hearing honeybees in music. I'll introduce Hello Little Honeybee from A to Z, which is a resource that you guys have access to. Elisa will come back and do hand lettering with children. Kelly will do Bringing Your Bee to Life. Amy will come back and wrap everything up for us. And then you'll have an opportunity to share any art with us that you create today. And then finally, we'll end, of course, with the survey in the link in the chat. All right, so now I'm going to invite Dr. Amy Miner to join us.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be with you tonight and thrilled to be a part of this really creative endeavor. So tomorrow I'll have you go ahead and advance the slides. So one of the things I wanted to do as we get started this evening is to help you focus in on the science standards that are at the heart of the content, the topic, and the integrated activities of this lesson. So just to begin with, we're looking specifically at the patterns of living things. And you can see standards from the USB academic standards for all of the elementary grades K through 6. And when we look at our younger learners in kindergarten and first grade, the best way to summarize that is to describe patterns of living things, the needs of living things, and how living things use their surroundings to survive. And in this case, we'll be talking about bees. Let's go ahead and look at grade 2. This is actually one of my favorite grades with this particular lesson tonight. When we're looking, in addition to patterns of living things, we go into some of the specifics of structure and function of parts and different habitats. That includes both the plants as well as the pollination that bees provide for those plants. And so in this particular standard and grade, we're looking at planning and carrying out investigations using various models and learning more specifically about those patterns. In grade 3, we move beyond to start talking about the changes that organisms go through during life cycles. And in this case, we're also talking about bees and how they grow and evolve in their life cycle. But mostly we'll be describing how environments can affect the traits of bees, or what we do as humans with the environment that impact bees and the bee population. In grade 4, and as we move into grade 5, we look specifically at the internal structures. We talk about specifically the parts of the bee that helps the bee receive information through their various senses. We talk about how bees obtain energy and matter from the food they eat, and the movement of matter among plants and animals, specifically through the pollination process. And then we round out our curriculum in grade 6 as we talk about the different interactions among organisms across multiple ecosystems. And because we're talking about pollination, this includes ecosystems of plants and animals, and in this case, the bees. So as you're listening to our different presenters today, please be focused on these kind of lenses and recognize that one of the beautiful strengths of integrating with the arts is that we strengthen the academic standards as well. So I'll turn it over to our next presenter.
I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Adam Johnston.
Thank you, Tamara. I will switch over so I can share my bee slides. I'm thrilled to be here. I was looking over the participant list and saw some familiar names, so welcome everyone. If you know me, you probably know me as a science educator, and my bee sense is something that doesn't often come up, but it turns out that I get to be a hobbyist beekeeper, and I am enamored with bees for so many reasons, and I simply want to share that with you. And I happen to also be a scientist, so those lives get to combine. When Tamara reached out to me, she said, "Do you know any beekeepers that we could reach out to?" And I said, "I know a few, but could I play along?" And so I was really delighted to be able to put this together, if for no other reason than to find the pictures I have taken of me and my bees, starting with this one, which is you can see me in the background. It's a selfie of me with thousands of bees here. I was also delighted to find out as I was going through these slides, just as an aside, I was thinking of this as my bee slides, you know, like the B side of an album, and I thought that was funny. And then as I was assembling that, my bee reel, if you're familiar with this, it's what kids used to do back before I started doing it. It wasn't cool anymore, but bee reel is a thing. And I was working on my honeybee reel of slides here when the bee reel posted. So there you have my dad joke and physics joke or science joke right there at the same time. Anyway, the first thing I wanted to point out is that when I last presented any work on bees, it was for a group of scientists, and they prefaced the entire visit with a giant list of questions because they had been studying bees. And this particular group of scientists were second graders. And I am enamored with the kinds of questions that our children can come up with and how important those questions are, both for our society and scientific investigation in general, as well as for the kids themselves. And I think those are the really important questions. Those are the ones that are central to their lives, what they care about. It turns out many of these questions that I have here are not yet solved. Many of them are critical to how we understand bees' lives and how we understand ecosystems, and they're also just really interesting. So I like to give them credit. We'll actually cover many of these inherently in the space that I want to kind of share with you. The first thing I want to point out, I've got these titles to kind of guide us through what I wanted to share. This first point is that bees are friendly. And this picture on the left is Bernice. She happened to be stray and she just decided to perch on my hand. She's perfectly comfortable there and I'm perfectly comfortable with her there. I think she got tangled up in some honey, so she was kind of sticky and I was kind of helping to free her. On the right is my kid, Reed. He happens to be we're actually installing bees into a hive. The little clip next to his hand is a little cage where the queen is being installed, special so she and the colony can get used to each other. But you'll notice he's working with bare hands. That's not where I'm most comfortable in that situation, but he was perfectly fine. He's got his hair covered so they don't get stuck, behind an ear or something like that. But this particular situation, literally thousands of bees right there, is not as terrifying as you may have, as you might assume. So in most cases, bees are perfectly harmless to you. They don't want to bother you. And as you probably know, if they were to sting you, that actually is the end of their lives. They would be doing it as a last resort to protect themselves and the rest of their colony. I also like to point out that bees are really tolerant. So you might say, well, they would sting me if I did something to them. And probably not, unless they thought you were a bear or something invading their hive. As a case in point, I've got this particular video. I had some friends over. They said, how do you install bees into a hive? I said, I'll show you. And it literally involves, what you'll see in a second, is something that looks like a lunchbox, kind of a mesh-sided lunchbox, and it's filled with 3 pounds or 10,000 bees. And I'm going to slam it on the ground, which I admit does not sound like a good idea. And that's to loosen them from the side of the box. And then I'm going to turn them upside down and shake them into this hive. So here's how that goes. My friends are saying, are you sure? Can we stand here? I said, yeah, you're perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. I'm not completely sure, but I was pretty sure it was fine. So I slam it on the ground and then I just dump them out. And they're fine. It's maybe not the best day of their life, but they're going to have worse things happen to them. And just because I'm a scientist, I had to include some slow motion footage of this. And this is roughly how it goes. If you see kind of in the foreground on the left of the video, there's a little clip with a little wood box. That's where the queen is. And it turns out when you do it this way, you install bees from multiple different hives. They're all coming together, and this particular queen is she's coming from a completely different place. So they all have to get used to each other. She's in the cage to protect herself because they're not used to her yet. They would see her as an invader until they realize that she's the queen and the leader. It'll take a few days. The other thing that you probably are well aware of is that bees really like your flowers, and that includes the apple blossoms that Juliet here is nestled into. She's getting nectar there, and we also know that they're going to be carrying pollen from this tree just inherently on their legs, and they're going to cross-pollinate with other flowers that they're going to visit. That's going to be good both for the plants as well as for the hive that they'll return to. On the right, you see this bee in a dandelion, and I want to make a really strong case that we love your dandelions. If you want to keep them there in your lawn, in fact, if you want to go ahead and blow on the dandelion seed pods and spread them all over, especially on your neighbor's lawn, that would be great, because these dandelions are the first flower, one of the first flowers that bees are going to be able to find in the spring. And I suspect, especially with a late spring like we're having, those are going to be really important. So if you could go ahead and let those grow, they're beautiful and my bees will appreciate it. Bees are also really helpful, and that goes a couple of different directions, both to one another and to us. So on the left, you see this bee, Amelia. She's flying in, and she has this little pouch that you see on her right leg. She probably has one on the left leg. It's out of focus because of the blur of her wing, I think. But that's pollen that she's been picking up as she goes from one plant or one flower to the next. And it's been accumulating. The reason the bee wants that pollen is because it's going to be something that's essential to kind of providing extra nourishment to the eggs, the brood that's just hatching in the hive. So not only is she spreading pollen around from flower to flower, it also becomes something that's essential to the livelihood of the colony. On the right, you see that particular bee, and I forget her name, I lose track, I don't really know the names of all the bees, but I like that as a running gag. That Suzette there is, she's actually got her head into the comb and she's spitting that recreation of nectar, that sugary substance, back into that particular hexagon of comb. So it's amazing that that comb is there. I'll show you some more footage of the comb. And it's amazing that the hexagons are there. And in particular, in this case, you see that that hexagon is exactly fitted to the size of the bee. And that's not a coincidence. This is all a beautiful design, the structure of the hive, the function of how the bees are going to interact with that hive, the function of how everything is going to be raised from egg to worker bee. That's all in complete, really perfect geometry. The mathematics of it all is really well coordinated. In parallel with that idea that they're helpful, they have to collaborate. And one feature of that, or one example of that, is that there are tens of thousands of bees in a simple hive, and they're literally crawling all over each other. And this is not a setting that I would ever tolerate. I kind of like my space. Bees thrive in this particular environment. They're going to be crawling over each other all of the time, and the whole time they're doing it, they're communicating with each other. And that could be through the dance of a bee that you've probably heard of, and we'll see a little bit later on in the workshop tonight. But also with pheromones, they know what each other is doing based on the scents that they are creating. And if someone is threatened, if the queen sends out a signal that says we need to leave, everyone is going to know that. And so they actually operate as one giant kind of organism rather than as independent beings. Also in collaboration with each other, you see on the left, this is some of their storage of food. And this is something that I'm going to harvest, or anything they have left over or extra that they won't need for the winter. I could harvest this. You see them in the middle, and here's, who was that? Juliet? I forget. I lost track of her name already. This is the one we saw with her head in the comb, spitting into it to make sure that that nectar is stored. And then you can kind of see in other places, it's deeper and deeper. And towards the top of this particular piece of hive, you see it getting capped off. What's really wonderful is that all of that material, the honeycomb that makes the hexagons, the honey itself that's going in and starting to be cured, and the wax that gets coated across the top, that's all coming from the same nectar. It's just going through a different process in the bee to become these different substances. They also have this substance, it's like wax, but even stickier, that's called propolis. And they use that to glue down everything that could be in the hive. On the right, this is a case where I had actually removed one frame of honeycomb to sample, or in this case, it might have been because that's where I was installing the queen. And I came back to it later on. And a couple things happened. One, and these are typical things. One was that they started creating comb from scratch, and I'll show you some of that on the next slide. The other thing is that they're actually trying to measure, we think, the science is not clear on this, but we think they're trying to measure the gap that they have to fill between one side of the hive and the other. And in the process, or in order to do that, they're actually making this chain of bees holding on to one another to try to get a gauge of what kind of space is there. And it's amazing to open up a hive and see them doing this. Like, it's almost like, is this for fun? Is this a stunt? Is this for art? Is this, but we think it's part of the engineering process they use to fill in any particular space that they don't deem as necessary, and they want to make sure they're using all that space. In that space, they'll freehand, if you will, the honeycomb. So generally, when you have a hive, you'll have some kind of frame, and it's already got a pattern of hexagons built in. But the bees can make this even without that hexagonal frame. They make it from scratch so that it fits their particular shape, and you can kind of see how they must be kind of starting from, this was a lid, so we're looking at the bottom half of the lid here. The bottom half of the lid is here, and they've kind of started to grow or build that out in these lobes. And up here up close, you can see as I've detached that, so I can put in my own frame that they can build from. They're still working hard at this, like they don't want to give up on it. But it's perfect little hexagons everywhere, all free-handed, all fitting together. And if you look at that up close, like this is a piece that I had saved. It's a little bit beaten up because I've shared it around with people and with students. Holding it up to a window, you can see those perfect hexagons that exactly match the size of the bee. And they're exactly hexagonal so that you get this perfect tiling of them. They fit together perfectly. Other shapes don't do that, not by making the same shape over and over again. It's structurally incredibly sound. It has that kind of rigidity to it, even though it's a very lightweight substance. This practically, like this piece of comb is about the same mass as a balloon would be in my hands. And then if you look up close to it, it's important to know that they're making these hexagons on two sides. So you can, if you're looking at me in the camera, you can imagine there's one side of comb that's moving out to the left and one side that's moving out to the right or open to the right. And those are attached to each other. When they make those two sets of hexagons, they overlap them in such a way that they're perfectly maybe anti-aligned, you might say, so that the vertex of each hexagon on the opposite side is in the hole of the hexagon on the facing side. So here's a hexagon on the facing side here, but on the opposite side, the hexagon is here. And that also increases the rigidity. And I don't know how they yell across the comb to the other bee, like, hey, Suzette, I'm working on a hexagon over here. Can you go ahead and center your hexagon right in the middle of this hole so that we can, I don't know how they do that. And I don't particularly need to know. I'm just enamored with the fact that it happens, and they do it this way every time. Bees, it's no surprise they're self-sufficient, and this is something that we take advantage of. The first way they do this is that on the left here, they're actually raising brood. So you can find different comb where they're either storing their food or they're raising their young. And where they raise their young, they're going to bring, not only will the queen lay eggs into these hexagonal cells, they'll also bring in extra pollen and they'll bring in more nectar, so that as soon as they cap this off and the egg starts to mature, when that larva of a honeybee emerges from the egg, it's immediately in this nourishing environment, and it's literally going to eat its way out. And then as soon as it's eaten its way out, it's going to clean up its cell. That's its first job. And then it's going to start cleaning up the cells around it. That's its second job. And then it will progress into all of the different jobs that could be within the hive until it becomes the worker bee that's flying around. And then it will, well, literally fly until it's dead. It's Here at the university, I started to liken it to a tenured professor. Like, you've achieved the ultimate, now just keep flying back and forth until you die. But it must be a pretty fun job. They get to fly miles and miles away. They make it back to the hive that they have. They do this all by scent, so that even if there are 2 or 4 or 6 hives next to each other, they would always return to the hive that is their home. Here on the right, they're capping off honey. And this is, again, that's something that they could use over the winter if they needed, if there's extra that they won't need over the winter, I'll go ahead and harvest it. And right here at the bottom right is that harvested honey after it's all been sitting there sealed off. And this can, honey is incredibly, you don't need to preserve it or anything. It's got preservatives built in to the magic that the bees have added to it. And that's why you can have a jar of honey sitting there on your counter for months or years. I also want to just point out that bees are lovely, and that comes in so many examples. But again, going back to the fact that bees are friendly, you can kind of, you don't want to mess with them too much. This is their home, but I can get close enough to them that I can set a camera on the top of the hive. This particular view is at the top looking down both to their main entrance, which is close to the ground, as well as to a secondary entrance that's just one little, back door of sorts that they can get in and out of. And if I put my camera there, and I step away, I don't want to bother them too much, and then I just record, and then put it, because I'm a science nerd, put it into slow motion, I can get some really beautiful footage. The closest thing I have to this experience is snorkeling in coral reefs in Hawaii and looking down in 20 feet of water and seeing that beauty. This view reminds me of that. So here you go. Oop. Except I have to hit play instead of advance. So there they are in full speed, and here they are in slow motion. And I love that I can see the various twists that they make, their stability throughout the entire thing, even when they run into each other, the different things they do with their wings to maneuver, and how they tolerate just going in and out of the hive with others coming in and out. There's, again, literally thousands of these beings doing this all the time. So they've just got to figure it out. And they don't seem to mind when they bump into each other, when they fall, when they're crawling over each other, when they're sharing an entrance. They also, incidentally, if there is another bee from another colony, they can detect that, or if there's a different kind of invader. If you pay enough attention to what's going on at the entrance, you'll see a few guards just kind of keeping track of things. So sometimes on a nice warm day, I'll just sit out there and just kind of watch what's going on from a relatively non-invasive distance. So when you get to see all of these materials, I just left this slide with some references. One of them not presented in my slides is how do we save bees, and certainly planting flowers, preserving flowers, not using pesticides where possible, that will all help. There's other things you can grow, and this Bee Conservancy helps with that. The footage of my slow motion, some other slow motion I've left on a web page, more of my pictures, sure, kids and dog, but also my pictures of bees I've left there. And then if you're interested in more stuff that I can do, I'd love to answer questions to follow up. But for now, I want to make sure we get to the art that you get to do alongside of our resident artists here. So thanks for letting me play along.
Adam, thank you so much. That was really great. And I see that there are a few questions that have come in, great questions for Adam. So Adam, if you want to check out the chat, maybe you could respond to a few of those.
Sure.
And I'm going to invite Elisa Peterson to join us now. She's going to lead us through making a hexagon book. She'll be using her overhead camera, and I'm going to go ahead and spotlight that. And if you want to make her overhead view bigger, you can use that slider that I talked about earlier that's in between the presentation and the panelist view. And that will make it better for you. All right, take it away, Elisa.
Thank you. Could you go to the next slide for me? On the presentation. Okay, so I wanted to tell you that this template that we have for you was originally created by Jamie Lynn Schaefer, and it's a great little book that is easy and it's customizable. And when we send out our resources after the event, we have actually a few other versions for you. This is the original version that you have, and it makes pretty good use of the paper. We have a smaller version as well. And you could photocopy this and make it larger, especially on drawing paper, which is great. This version tells you all of the folds and cuts that you need to do, but we also have another template that doesn't have any writing on it. So if you're good and you understand it, you don't have to print it with all of these words. And then we've made a template in Adobe. It's an Adobe PDF that you can actually open up and type into if you would like to have some typed words on your document, and you can save that and then use the template again and type other things in it. So that's kind of fun. And then we also made a large one like this, and this would be an individual spread of 2 pages where you have a blank one where you could draw, and then one on this side with lines so students could write. And this would be great for a student to make a larger book, or maybe a class book where each student contributes 1 or 2 pages. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you on our original template. I hope that you have that and that you have cut it out, or you could start cutting it out now. We're going to cut all the way around the outside edge, then down this little line, and we're going to remove the center piece. And I've already done that here for myself. And the first thing that you'll do after it's cut out is to begin folding it. And even though this side has the words on it, I find that to make your pages work out the best, it's better to start with it flipped over when you fold it. And you can start on either side and just fold each hexagon back and forth in an accordion style, like this. I sometimes hold things up in the air when I fold them because I'm an adult, but for children, I always say, keep it down on the table and line up your corners and press it down. So when I see, especially younger kids, 1st and 2nd grade, folding up in the air, I remind them it works a little bit better if you keep it down on the table. Okay, so if you want to just do a simple short book, all you need is 1 page, and you can see that the pages turn really well. And then also, if you want, you can open it up and see all of the pages at the same time. But if you are working with students that want to add more information to their book, they can always add another set of pages and use all of them, or cut some off and just use the ones they want. I'm going to show you. I didn't fold this one up, and that's okay. But if you wanted to, you would just take one of these pages and put glue on it, and then set this one right on top above it. And then you've got this great book that almost looks like a figure 8. If you added more pages, you could put one here and have it come off this direction and just keep going, and then have them all folded up. But for this version, I'm just going to use 1. Okay, once you have all your pages folded, you could set that aside. Later in the webinar, I'll show you lots of ideas of what you can put inside the book. And depending on your preference, you could have the students make the book all the way and then add their information inside. Or you could, at this point, add all of the information to your pages and then later put the cover on top. But I'm going to show you now the cover. So in the template, there's this center piece right here. You can pull that out and use that to trace the cover. It's basically the same size as the other pages. And if your students are really great at cutting and this is nice and clean, you can use that as your piece to trace. We also have another one up here in the corner, just in case they make a kind of mess of this one as they're cutting it out, they could trace that one as well. So for covers, I am using a cereal box that I just traced 2 of those hexagons right onto it. And you can see I put them together when I traced it just to make my cutting a little bit simpler. With really younger kids, you can omit this step that I'm going to show you of using a cereal box and decorative paper and just have them use cardstock as their covers. That would make this project go a lot quicker, but it's really fun to be able to use fancier paper and have a little bit heavier covers if your students are up to the challenge. So I've gone ahead and cut out my 2 covers here, and I have this plain yellow paper. You might have decorative paper or colored paper in your kit. You could use anything that you wanted, but for this, we'll go ahead and put glue on one cover. And when kids use a glue stick on something like this, they're often going to go off the edge and come toward you, and that would make a big blob of glue there. So I always say kind of just go around the edges, but stay on the piece. And then I'm going to turn that over and press it into my decorative paper. Now you notice I actually cut these little rectangles, or it could be squares, out instead of just putting this right onto one large piece of paper. And this is helpful for kids because they need to have a little space around their paper. And I'll show you that in just a minute. And if they're trying to gauge that themselves on a larger piece, sometimes they'll put them too close together. So if you give them 2 smaller pieces and say, make sure there's a gap all the way around it, that just is a little helpful. Now that that's pressed down, I think it's helpful to have kids go on this side and use this sort of fleshy part of their hand to press it down all the way around the edges. So I'll do the next one. Let's see. There we go. I'll just do that kind of quickly. And glue that down as well. And then we're going to trim away the extra paper that we don't need. And I like to envision about 1/4 inch of extra. If you get it too close, it's a little bit harder to do the next step. If you have it a little bit too far away, that's fine. So a little more than 1/4 inch would be okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just kind of snip those edges off. Now there are 2 options for folding in these edges. Both of them start the same way. It really helps quite a bit if the students can go ahead and fold all of the edges and sort of crease them up before we add glue. And I'm hoping that you guys are working alongside me at home with your own books. This is such a simple process, I bet, that you can sort of glance at the screen and stay with me. But I'm just folding all of my edges. Then I'm going to add some glue. And this is a great time to save your desk by having a little piece of scratch paper to put down, obviously, for gluing on. Okay, so for the first option, I'm just going to glue all the way around and fold my edges down. So I'll do that pretty quick. And if I were to just turn my book quite a bit, I would end up getting the glue on the scratch paper onto the nice side of my book. So you can, if you need to turn it, you can kind of turn it together or just hold it down with your one hand and glue around. Okay, now for this, oh, I missed this side. For this simple version, we're not going to cut the corners at all. And I find it works great anyway. Just start at one side and fold it up and keep working way around and kind of just press where you get that little bit of bulk of extra paper. And if you're using quite heavy paper, you will have a lot of bulk right here, which would be a little bit annoying, but not impossible. You can have students go back around and give it a pinch at all the corners, or even turn it upside down and press it down like that. So that's the easiest way to do this. But for a little bit more advanced students, what you could do instead is have them trim off this extra paper. And I'm going to imagine a straight line running this way. And I just trim that away on all of the corners. I kind of go almost all the way up to the cardboard, but not quite. If they went all the way up to the cardboard, that'd be okay too. And so then with that out of the way, it'll just reduce a little bit of the bulk in the corners. So we'll go ahead and put my glue all the way around and get those down as well. You probably know glue stick can dry fairly fast. So this is a quick process to glue it and fold them down. And then just like before, since I'm pre-creased, I can hold this up in the air and just fold and pinch all the way around. And that goes fairly well and pretty quick. Then I'm going to fold this up so that I don't have fresh glue to set my pieces back down onto. That's one thing you can talk to the students about, is keeping a clean workspace. Okay, and then to put this book inside, I would just glue one side and stick it in, and glue the other side and stick it in. Since the cover is basically the same exact size as the book, you just want to line it up pretty well and press it down. Mine isn't lined up very well, so I can try again. I have a few seconds of work time. And then give it a good pinch. Then I'll just glue the other side and stick it down. So, oh, I forgot something awesome that I was going to show you. So if your book has a lot of pages in it, sometimes it can get annoying because they'll start, it won't stay closed very well. So one thing that you can do is take a piece of ribbon, and it's easy with children to just first tape it down on the inside of the cover, like that, and then go ahead and glue your cover on. I would have put this on both sides had I remembered it on time, but even on one side, if it's long enough, it can kind of work okay, because what you can do is wrap it around and then tie it here, kind of fold it over and give it a little tie, and that can hold it closed. Or if I had it on both sides, then I would tie a little bow right there on the edge. That's totally optional, but it's great to kind of keep it closed. And then it's nice having it just on the one side, because then I can open it up page by page or turn it around and have the whole large hexagon. What I love about this is kind of what Adam was talking about, how these hexagons all fit together so well. So we have all of these hexagons here, and they go together to make one large hexagon, which is pretty cool. So this is a blank book. Blank books are great, but you probably want to fill them up with something. So I'm going to show you a few things that I put in my hexagon books. First, this is a large one. This was made by my son, and he used that bigger template with the writing lines. And in this one, instead of having the hexagon curve around, it will just turn straight like a regular accordion. So you can see he did the life cycle of a honeybee. So we have an egg, and he's written about it here, larva and pupa and adult when it closes. So this one opens straight. One thing that would be nice about this, you can't quite see it as well as I can, but you could hang this up on a bulletin board and have all of the pages showing, and then at some point take it down, and then it would be an artifact that you could keep in the classroom or send home with the student. Okay, I have a few more to show you. Let's see. I don't remember what's on the insides of them until we open them up. This is a fun one. I looked up information about the process of making honey. And so it says gather nectar, break down the sugars, fill the honeycomb, fan the honey. That's something that's interesting, that the bees kind of huddle together and flap their wings so that the honey can thicken up a little bit. Then they cover it with wax. And then a little bit later, you can harvest the honey, but you want to not take too much honey. So that's something. Okay, there's another little book that I created. And this one, you can see I didn't put a ribbon, and it does kind of bounce around and come open a little bit. This one is, I used the typing template, and added words to this one. And it's designed to come open and kind of lay flat. So this is all about the body features of a honeybee. And I designed this one a little bit strange. I think if you're going to type the words in, it works best if you maybe don't do too many pages, but this talks about the head and the thorax, the abdomen, the wings, the legs and the antenna and the exoskeleton. So that's kind of fun. And then I think this is the last one I'd like to show you for now. This little one talks about cues that flowers have that attract the honeybees to come and find them. And so it says honeybees are attracted to flowers by visual and olfactory cues. So they like flowers that are showy, that have nectar guides, which can lead them to where they can find that nectar and pollen right in the middle. The size matters sometimes. The color, did you know honeybees don't see the color red? They're attracted to blues and purples. Other pollinators are attracted to other colors. The scent can draw the honeybees in, and also the last one, the shape. Honeybees actually like flowers that are tubular. They go in kind of like lavender there. So I hope that you made a blank book and that you're thinking about what information about bees would really align well with your grade level. In a little bit, I will walk you through what you can do to teach students about how to add their information into their own book. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elisa. That was great. All right, now for something a little bit different. I'm going to show you how to make a honeybee puppet. And we pre-recorded this so you would have good camera views and be able to see close-up making of a puppet.
Hello, my name is Tamara Goldbogen, and I'm the BTS Endowed Chair in Arts Learning at Weber State University. I'm going to show you how to make a knotted fleece bee puppet, just like this one. You will need one piece of black fleece that is 3 inches by 12 inches, one piece of yellow fleece that is 3 inches by 8 inches, with the ends rounded so that we can use it to make wings, one full-size pipe cleaner that's black, and one yellow pipe cleaner that is cut in half, at least one googly eye, and some type of adhesive. I like to use Fabri-Tac, but if you're working with younger students, you'll want to use glue dots. To make the bee puppet, the first thing you need to do is take your black piece of fleece. And now you're going to pick the end that you want to be the head, and you're just going to make a knot, just like this. And the great thing about knotted fleece puppets is that you have the opportunity to kind of adjust the knot and get the head just the way you like it. Or if you're not really happy with your knot, you can just undo it and try again until you get a knot that you like for the head of the bee puppet. And this is a great activity for students who are learning knots so they can practice their knots. All right, there's the head of my bee puppet. And now on the other end of my puppet, I'm going to make another knot. For this knot, I'm going to have a little bit sticking out like a little stinger. And I like to keep my bee kind of fat here, so I'm not going to tie those knots too tight. All right, the next thing you want to do is take your yellow fleece, and this is going to be the wings. So you're going to tie it right in between the head and the tail of your bee. Another knot. And take a little while you're tying this one, because you're going to want to make sure that you tie this so that the fleece kind of stands up a little bit like wings, so you can kind of adjust that. Fleece is pretty forgiving, so it's a good material to use for puppet making. All right, so we have the body of my bee puppet with wings, and now we're going to work on the antenna. For the antenna, you're going to use your half pipe cleaner, that's yellow, and I'm going to go to the head of my bee puppet, And I'm just going to wrap it around right at the base of the head. Wrap it around so that it's secure. And then I'm just going to bend it just like an antenna. There we go. So now I have some antenna on my bee puppet. And the next thing is we're going to do a control rod so that this becomes a puppet. You're going to use your full-size black pipe cleaner, and you're going to fold it in half so that it looks like a V, just like that. And now you're going to twist the bottom so that it becomes a Y. So I'm twisting it, twisting the bottom, and I'm changing my V into a Y. I have the Y, and now you're going to take that and I'm going to place it right just underneath the wings. And then I'm going to fold over the tops, just like this, so that it is secure. Maybe give it a little twist if I have anything sticking out. And now I have a control rod, which makes this a bee puppet, so I can control how my puppet moves through space. The final step to making the bee puppet is to add the eye or eyes. I'm going to add one googly eye because I would like my puppet to be a cyclops. So I've added one eye, and now I have my completed bee puppet. So there are a lot of fun ways for your students to activate a puppet. You could practice how a bee moves. In today's webinar, Kelly Bruce Glenn will show you how you can practice bee movement with your puppet and then with your body. Or maybe you want to practice responding to music. Samantha Steffen will show you a few ways to incorporate puppets and music. My favorite is putting on a puppet show. It's one of my favorite ways to use puppets in a classroom, and I love to have students create their own puppet shows. First, they create characters for their puppets that they make. I've included a character sheet in the resources for this webinar. The character sheet will give you a few simple questions that will help your students use their imaginations to create names and characters, all sorts of facts about their puppets. And then the students will work in small groups to create and perform a short show where one of the puppets faces their greatest fear. All of the puppets work together to find a peaceful solution. I love to have the students incorporate relevant vocabulary into their puppet shows. I might pull vocabulary from the Hello Little Honeybee from A to Z book and ask students to incorporate at least 3 vocabulary words into their puppet show. I hope you have fun using puppets as a teaching tool in your classroom.
Great. All right, that was the puppet portion. And now we are going to move to hearing honeybees in music with Samantha Steffen.
Hello, I'm Samantha Steffen, BTS Arts Program Coordinator at Weber State University. And today we are going to discuss 2 ways you can integrate music concepts and honeybees. Some of you may know the chant, Bee, Bee, Bumblebee. This is a wonderful chant to teach beat, rhythm, and meter concepts in lower elementary grades. Please open the link in the Zoom chat to see the chant. Let's speak this chant together. 1, 2, ready, chant. Bee, bee, bumblebee, stung a man upon his knee, stung a pig upon his snout. I declare that you are out. This simple, short chant is an excellent introduction to beat and rhythm. I tell students that the beat is the heartbeat of the music. Beat is even and keeps the music going, and the rhythm matches our words. You can ask your students to show the beat as they speak the chant one time, and clap the rhythm as they speak the chant another time. If your students are ready, you might even divide the class into 2 groups and ask one group to show the beat and the other to clap the rhythm at the same time. Another idea is to make a sign that says beat on one side and rhythm on the other. Switch the sign as students chant and see if they can switch between beat and rhythm successfully. Any of these ideas are great opportunities for informal formative assessment through observation. Bee, bee, bumblebee is also an excellent chant for presenting, preparing, and practicing quarter and eighth notes. You might start using terms like long and short. Long, long, short, short, long, short, 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 long. Or by asking students to identify where there is one sound on one beat and where there are two even sounds on one beat. When students are ready, you can present quarter and eighth notes using whatever counting terminology you prefer. Students can practice writing quarter and eighth notes using manipulatives such as popsicle sticks to draw stick notation, or large glass beads, game tokens, or anything else they can group into ones and twos to indicate one sound or two sounds per beat. Or you can give them miniature whiteboards or even paper in plastic sheet protectors and dry erase markers so students can practice writing rhythms. However you choose for students to notate rhythms, after they practice writing rhythms from the chant, you can ask them to compose and perform their own rhythm patterns within certain parameters. For example, I might ask students to write a 4-beat pattern using quarter and eighth notes, and all 4 beats cannot be the same. This is another opportunity for me to assess student learning. You might use bee, bee, bumblebee to teach duple meter and 4/4 time because of the simplicity of the rhythms. Duple meter has a strong, weak, or a strong, weak, weak, weak beat pattern. 4/4 time means there are 4 beats per measure and the quarter note gets 1 beat. You might display the chant and ask students to place the lines to show the measures and a double bar line to show the end of the chant. Like so many songs and chants, there is a game for bee, bee, bumblebee that you can adjust to fit your classroom. In this game, students sit in a circle and speak the chant. You might ask students to pat the beat on their legs, pass the beat around the circle, or clap the rhythm while you use your bee puppet to move the beat around the circle. However you choose to play, the student the beat lands on with the word out is out of the game. When I play games where students get out, I might only play a few rounds of the game so it doesn't become about winning, or I might have something else for the student who gets out to do. In this case, I would have the student who gets out tell me something they remember about bees from class, and then I would have that student show the beat with the bee puppet for the next round, which is another opportunity for individual assessment. When I mark down that a student has had a turn, I also mark a plus, check, or minus, indicating how well they performed the skill. If we were playing longer than just a few rounds, I would have the out students start a new circle to continue playing. That circle wouldn't have students get out and would grow as a new student joins each round. Students stay engaged and continue practicing the beat and rhythm skills. Another way to integrate music concepts and honeybees is to plan a listening response lesson using Rimsky-Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee. One of my favorite things about responding to music lessons is how flexible they are. You can customize your questions and how you want students to respond according to the students and situation you have. For any listening response lessons, the 3 things you need to do are find a good recording or portion of a recording, decide what you want your students to learn from or recognize in the music, and decide how you want your students to respond. I also recommend you keep your recording short, especially for younger students, and that you guide their listening according to the questions you're going to ask. For example, you might direct your students to listen for how many kinds of instruments they hear, how the music makes them feel, or what they think might be happening in the story. If I need my students to listen for more than one thing, I might consider playing it more than once and asking them to listen for just one thing at a time. Flight of the Bumblebee is perfect for this kind of lesson with younger students because it's exciting, recognizable, and only about 90 seconds long. So let's listen to Flight of the Bumblebee. As we listen, imagine a bumblebee. What does it sound like the bee is doing? How does that match what we know about bees? Feel free to jot down some of your thoughts. Now let's look at some activities you could use with students. Please click the link in the chat to see 3 sample activities. In the first activity, Roll and Respond, I would ask students to roll a 6-sided dice and verbally answer the question that they rolled. On the second page, What's the Buzz?, I'm asking students to respond on paper to 2 questions about bees. If I had very young students, I might have them respond verbally and make a list of class responses to display. Finally, on the third page, Picture It, I'm asking students to draw what it sounds like is happening in the music. Other options include letting students choose which way they want to respond, or connecting to dance or drama by using movement to respond to the music. You could even let your students act out the music using your bee puppet. Whichever way I choose, I'm customizing my questions for my students and guiding their listening before we start. I hope your brain is buzzing with ideas on how to start integrating music concepts and honeybees. There are so many possibilities, and I encourage you to find what works best for you.
Samantha, thank you so much for all these great ideas for integrating bees and music. Now we want to introduce you to another resource that we have for you. If you received materials in the mail, you probably received a book that looks a little bit like this, called Hello Little Honeybee from A to Z. Don't worry if you didn't receive materials, we have a PDF for you. We will put a link to the PDF of the book in the chat, and this will also be available in your resource folder. Just a little bit about this book. Hello Little Honeybee from A to Z was actually created as part of a Weber State University course called Children's Literature, Book Arts, and Science in spring of 2022. Our community partners were Weber County Library System and the Book Arts program at the University of Utah. This A to Z book was written and illustrated by the WSU students, and we have a video reading of the book featuring Diego Batista as the beekeeper and Annie Batista as Little Honeybee. The book has really fun did you know facts about bees on each page that are not in the video. There will also be a Spanish version of the video out soon, and we'll include a link to that in your resources as well. We did want to give you a sneak peek of the video tonight.
Hello, my name is Diego, and welcome to my garden. As you can see, my beehive has been very busy lately. I want you to meet a friend of mine.
Hello, I'm Little Honeybee.
Hello, Little Honeybee. You're just in time. I was about to read a book called Hello, Little Honeybee, from A to Z.
Oh, a book about me? What fun! Now we can all learn about honeybees together.
Let's get started.
A is for antenna.
Antennae are like our mouths and noses. Bees use them to find daisies and roses.
B is for beehive.
Beehives are a home in which honeybees stay. They come in all shapes and keep predators away.
C is for honeycomb.
The walls and floor of the hive are made of honeycomb. Tiny hexagons are the shape inside their home.
D is for drone.
A simple bug, really, the drone bee is such. He mates with the queen, but doesn't do much.
E is for eyes.
2 eyes on the side can help see a petal, while the 3 on top find places to settle.
F is for flying.
4 wings beat 20 miles an hour to fetch food, flying as far as 5 miles to feed the brood.
G is for garden.
Visiting the garden filled with fragrant blooms, enjoying each bright flower on its daily zooms.
We'll stop the video there. We just wanted to give you a brief sneak peek at the video. Don't worry, we will make sure that you have the link in your resources, so we will send that to you. And for those of you who didn't get the book in person, we didn't have that many of the books, so we were only able to send materials out to the first 50 people who registered. But we're going to make sure that you have all the resources available to you in case you want to use these again. So we hope you liked that video. And now I'm going to invite Elisa to come back and join us. Hi, Elisa.
Hi, thank you. Tamara, go ahead and go to the next slide. So we are going to practice drawing and doing some hand lettering. So I wouldn't write directly in the book that you made already. So grab a piece of paper and a pen, some markers or colored pencils. And those of you who didn't get the supply kit, you can do this as well. Just any kind of piece of paper will work. So we are going to do hand lettering. I have a word bank here on the side of your screen, and we'll put it in the chat as well. These are the words that are used in the book that Tamara just introduced to us. You could use any word you can think of to practice some of this hand lettering, but I love these words, and there's some great ones to choose from there. So if you're like me, you've probably done like bubble letters and block letters since you were pretty young, and it's not a new thing. But I really wanted to talk about how you might introduce this to children. My daughter, she's 20 now, and she said when she was in 4th grade, she had a teacher who I think it was a rainy recess, and she showed the class how to do bubble letters. And she said it was life altering. Just having an adult show her those skills or those steps was awesome. And she said it opened up a lot of possibilities for her. And she actually said it was kind of like currency for the kids who could do a good job at it. So it was something that made her really excited to write down words. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Is that the video? Oh, good, it's not. So I showed you the books that I created already, and this is a list of other possible ideas that I thought of. Some of these are the ones I created, and there are a few more. In your resources folder that we'll send you later, I have links to websites that are child-friendly that talk about each of these things. And if you're like me, once you click one, you're going to end up going down a rabbit hole. There's so much really good, useful information online about bees and other pollinators that are information specifically made for children. So you'll find a lot of great things. This will just be the tip of the iceberg for you to start looking and deciding how you want to introduce this information to your students. Also, on the resource page that we'll send you, I have a link to a website that has 80 picture books about honeybees and about their lives and what they do. So there's certainly a lot of really great resources to choose from. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, but don't start the video just yet. Okay, I'm going to show you some super basic instructions about how to talk about bubble letters with kids. And I'd like you to choose a word and just follow along. So let's go ahead and start the video. To make bubble letters, start by writing your word and spread your letters out just a little bit more than normal. The next step is to use a pen and trace around each letter to create kind of a bubble around the letter. You can explain it to children by saying that you are creating a racetrack that curves around each letter. You can make block letter style by turning corners at the ends of the letters instead of just going around in a smooth curve. In this case, I'm using a colored pencil to trace around instead of a pen. When you're finished tracing around each letter, just grab your marker and go back and fill in each shape all the way. This tries the patience of some kids, but it's really great to carefully and slowly fill in those letter shapes. Thanks. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so as I said, sometimes the kids don't want to take that time to fill it in. It takes a lot of time to do bubble letters, right? It's a little bit time consuming, so why should we do it? Okay, next slide. The big reason is because of memory. We really want our students to remember what we're learning, and some of these things that we'll do in the next few minutes can really help with memory. So let's go to the next slide. When students learn new information and it goes into their mind and it's stored in sort of a temporary storage place called their hippocampus. And if it's not something that the students find interesting or think is very important, it will go away. It stays there temporarily. But if they recognize or realize that it is important, a thing that happens called consolidation, and it moves from the hippocampus to the cortex, which is the outer covering of the brain, and it's stored there longer. So you can see I have one little arrow here, meaning that the information is being transferred. But the cool thing is, if you know how to make consolidation happen, you can do multiple things all at the same time. So we'll go to the next slide. That will make that transfer and kind of be stronger and stay there longer. And so the next few slides will tell you a few things that you can do all simultaneously to help students remember information for a long time. So next slide. Rehearsal is one of those things that helps students be able to remember things. That's obviously just repeating information over and over again, like doing flashcards or just saying the same thing again and again and again. The thing is that can get boring. And when you are actually doing something fun or more interesting, like drawing bubble letters, what I find is that I say the word a bunch of times in my head as I'm coloring them in, or I think about what the words mean. So you're slowing down the time that students are spending with a word or with a concept and helping them sort of repeat it in their mind, which is cool. The next thing is, in bubble letters, we're writing the word and we're writing it kind of multiple times and drawing that letter shape. And there was a study that was done, and this was published in Trends in Neuroscience and Education. And this study had 3 groups of kids. One group were asked to type a letter. Another group was asked to trace a letter, like trace the dotted lines. And then the third group was asked to look at a letter shape and then write the letter themselves by looking at it. And then they took all of those kids and gave them an fMRI to see what they were thinking about as they showed them the same letters again. And what was interesting is the ones that drew out the letter from looking at it rather than tracing or typing, more areas of their brain were activated. And those areas were the parts of your brain that really helped with reading. And so that study basically said that handwriting rather than typing or tracing out letters is really important for early recruitment and letter processing in parts of your brain, which I think is awesome. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I hope that you are playing around with lettering and thinking about maybe how you might introduce that idea to students. Here's another one that's a little bit quicker and faster and also pretty great. So we'll go ahead and watch. Oh wait, before we start, pick another word to use. So go to the chat, think of one of those words, pick one, and I'd like you to try it out. Okay, let's go ahead and start. This lettering style is just a little bit quicker. Start by writing the word using a fat tipped marker And you don't have to spread the letters out this time. This time, grab a pen and trace around the outside edge of the letter. Try to keep your pen lines very close to the edge of the markers. It's okay if it's not perfect, but that dark line kind of helps the letters stand out just a little bit. You can do block letter style like this one, or you can do a curved style like I'm doing here. Okay, next slide. This lettering style is just right. So that's pretty simple and easy to do. Hopefully you can try out a couple of words. And I wanted to tell you another way that we consolidate information and keep it in our long-term memory, and that is through emotional arousal. When you're feeling strong emotions like happiness or pride in your work or sadness or sorrow, that information can stay with you longer. I think as teachers, we want to encourage those positive emotions. And so when kids are doing something that's enjoyable, they're going to remember things longer. But I wanted to tell you about a study. Well, it was an article that was published in Early Childhood Education Journal. They talked about the usefulness of having children create the instructional materials that you use in your classroom. We know we often have sight words posted around the room, or spelling lists, or all kinds of posters that are beautiful and they look great and their design is great. But what happens is that students sort of don't notice them after a while. When students are creating their own work, they are going to feel positive about it and be more interested in paying attention to it. So this article said that when the children see their work is respected, children become aware of their own self-worth, and this increases their self-esteem. And then the learning environment becomes personalized through the artwork that contains each individual child's feelings and thoughts. So if you're creating these books and then maybe hanging them in the room or having the kids let each other look through and read their books, they're going to feel great about taking the time to do this work, which is cool. And I wanted to say that my slideshow uses my own handwritten words to kind of model that for you, that sometimes we want everything to be slick and perfect and well designed, but allowing it to be a little bit messier and let the kids write it out themselves is a great way to help them learn and process that information better. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, another way that we remember things for a long time is through generation. This means that children are coming up with their own ideas or their own thing. And so basically, when you create a work of art about something that you're learning, that helps consolidate that information in your cortex and it helps you remember it longer, which is pretty great. So as they're deciding what words need to go in their book and drawing them out themselves, creating that themselves, they are going to remember it longer. Let's go on to the next slide. This one is elaboration. I really like this one. That means you have an idea and you're adding more information. So sometimes you might say, we don't have an end of level test about bees. Honeybees aren't on any of our standards specifically, but just like Amy told us, there are lots and lots of things that connect to honeybees, or that honeybees can help you teach things about environments, changes in environments, how things grow, life cycles, all of those kinds of things. That's what we want students to remember. And by adding extra information, like talking about the honeybee, or by adding the time it takes to do the book, we're making a little nest of extra information that holds that key piece stronger, so that it'll have a frame of reference and students can actually access it later. So that's elaboration. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, this is another way to do bubble letters. This is maybe with a little bit older students. And if you're going to try this one, pick maybe a shorter word. You can do a long word too, but it'll be quick with a short word like bee. Okay, let's go ahead and start this one. This lettering style uses negative space. Start by writing your words with a pencil and then trace around them in racetrack style using a marker. When that's finished, use the marker to draw a shape around your word and color it in, leaving the letter shapes blank. Now add some pattern or texture around the word using a pen. Finally, erase those pencil lines. Okay, next slide. I noticed in the chat that somebody said, can you give an example of elaboration? That's anytime that you give more information than students need to sort of make it more interesting. This is a non-honeybee example, but my mother really hated history and she couldn't remember dates and facts. She just hated it, and names. And then when she was in college, she had a history professor who was an amazing storyteller, and he told her about people's lives and just stories of the information. And she found that she loved history when she took the vital information and added it to extra information that surrounded it. Those stories helped her remember that information and love it. Okay, so let's go on and talk about thinking about what you're going to put in your book. So I showed you that we have a template where you can go in the computer and type in some information and maybe have students illustrate it, and that's great. But if you have the time, it's better to have them choose what words they're going to put in the book. So if you're like me, sometimes you've had students, you want it to be a little quick and you give them a passage of text and then they write it down and they put it into their work. It's great because they're writing it, they're getting that rehearsal, but it's a little bit not great because sometimes that can just be mindless transcribing and they can turn off their mind and not even know what they've written down. I'm sure that you've had that experience before. They're just not paying attention when they're copying something directly. So we'll go to the next slide. So if you have the time to do it, it's much more valuable. Tamara, go ahead and advance the slide. Thank you. To have students summarize and synthesize information instead. So if you have a picture book that talks about the life cycle of a bee, they could copy that information straight into the book that they're making, or they could read a passage of text from that book and think about how to say it in their own words in their own book. There was a study, and oh, I should say that I'm going to give you access to all of the research that I'm talking about today in the resource folder that will come later. So you'll have access to read these studies or see these websites and articles. But this study had students who were directly copying down information that their teacher said versus quickly jotting it down in their own words instead. And the article said, obviously, it's great to take more notes, but the truth is the group that summarized and wrote down less of the information remembered the information longer because as they were writing it quicker, their brain was processing it, figuring out what it was about and how to say it in their own words. So if you can have students write their own words in their own book, they can read a passage or watch a video and write it themselves, they're going to be able to remember that information longer. And it's interesting because I know for me, if a student hasn't written down everything, I worry that they're not going to remember everything. But the truth is they'll remember more when they've processed it in their mind. Okay, let's go to the next slide. One more video. I'm going a little bit quick, but yeah, we'll just keep going. Let's watch this video.
This lettering project is a great one to help children think more about what each word means. This one's simple enough. Draw something that connects to your bubble letters that gives a hint about what the word means. And here's another example.
Okay, next slide. I do have to say, sometimes it's tricky to sit and think, how would I show this in a picture? How would I show this in a picture? Which is exactly what you want. When students think about things and put a little effort into it, it helps them remember longer. And so I have an example. There was a study, and this was, oh, I can't see where it was published, but it had a group of undergraduate students, and they told that group a list of words that were really simple, like truck and house and flower and bee. And half of the students had to just write the word down a few times. The other half of the students had the same amount of time, but they had to draw a little picture of the word. And what's cool is at the end, they had a little quiz and had the students write down as many of the words that they could remember from the list as possible. And the group that wrote down the words, they remembered 20% of the words. But the group that drew the pictures for the words, they remembered 45% of the words. So we're more than twice as many as the other group. When you're having to think up that picture yourself, you're spending more time with it. So let's go to the next slide. The thing that this is called is pictorial representation. It's just like when people say a picture's worth 1,000 words, correct. But when you come up with a picture yourself, that's generation and elaboration. And so you're doing all of those things at the same time. The cool thing is the same group that did the study I just talked about, they went on to do a few more studies and they were about note taking. And one group copied down exactly what the teacher had written on the board. The other group had to draw pictures of the ideas that the teachers were saying. And so what they found is that every single time the people who had to draw and come up with a picture in, themselves, rather than just be shown a picture to draw, they remembered things better. So they found their conclusion was that drawing is an effective and reliable encoding strategy, and it is far superior to writing, which is so neat. When students visually represented science concepts, their recall was nearly twice as good as when they wrote down the definitions supplied by the teacher. I just love that. So we've been talking about doing hand lettering, so students can write those words into their books, but also consider having the students do their own illustrations as well. So writing the words in a way that slows them down and then thinking about the images will really help them process this information and consolidate it and keep it for quite a long time. Okay, next slide. So I'm excited to see you make your own book. You may not have time to make a book tonight, but you could start thinking about what type of illustrations or what content you would like to keep in your book or introduce to your students. Let's go to the next slide. Tonight, you have hopefully been making a lot of things. You made your little book, maybe a couple of practice hand lettering things, and you made a bee puppet. We would like to see those. So I've created a Padlet, which is a really great picture sharing website. You can scan this QR code with your phone or tablet and upload a picture of anything that you've created there. Or the link is in the chat. You can click that link and upload a picture. So take the picture on your own device and then upload it there. If we go to the next slide, this is what it looks like if you scan the QR code with your phone. You'll go to the website and then you can push a plus sign, which is sort of down at the bottom. And then it'll give you these little icons that you can see in the hexagons. I think that's pretty cool. And you'll want to pick either camera to use your camera or the landscape picture that would take you to your photo roll. And then you can pick what you want to share with us and click publish. You can put your name on it or a little comment or write nothing on it. Any of those are fine. And you should be able to post your images without logging in. And later at the end of the webinar, we'll take a look and see what you created. So I'm super hopeful that we get to see some awesome stuff. Okay, I think that's the last slide, Tamara. I'll send it back to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Elisa. All right, next we have Kelly Bruce Gunn leading us in bringing your honeybees to life, exploring that through dance and through movement. But before we do that, we want to take a look back at the video from Adam so we can really think about honeybees move so that we can then move our bodies like honeybees. I love watching that. All right, here is the video from Kelly.
Hi, my name's Kelly Bruce Glenn, and I'm here to share with you some dance strategies to use in your classroom when talking about bees. Did you know that bees communicate through movement just like dancers? They move to tell the who, what, when, where, and how nectar is found around their hive. Today, we are going to explore energy qualities. Energy qualities in dance talk about the how we move. So let's start off first by just moving our arms for 8 counts. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, freeze. Great work. Now, let's add an energy quality to it. I want you to move your arms for 8 counts in a sharp way. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Great work. Let's add a soft quality. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, a sustained quality is if you're moving through peanut butter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A loose quality. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, let's get back to the bees. So, our bees are trying to communicate through what's called the wiggle dance to tell all of their hive mates that there is nectar around the hive. They're going to move in a loose quality. Let's try that for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now our bees are going to talk about where and how to get to the nectar. They're going to move in a sharp way to let all of their hive mates know that the nectar is rich. It's 800 feet away, so they'll move for 8 counts. Now, they're going to give them directions and tell them they have to go over the hill and around the tree. And our movement's going to do just that. Let's try it. 8 counts, sharp movement, over and around. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, over 6, around 7, freeze. Excellent. Now our bees are going to share that the hive is full of nectar and that is ready to ripen into honey. And they're going to move in a sustained way for 4 counts. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can add all of that together to create your own unique choreography. Don't forget that the qualities that we used in this story actually mimic the way that bees communicate to one another. But get creative by moving into your legs, your stomach, or even your head. Thanks for joining us today, and happy moving.
Great. We got some excellent ideas for integrating movement and learning about bees. And here is just a quick reminder that we would love to see whatever you're working on and creating. Here is the QR code for you again, as well as the link to the Padlet that we have put into the chat box. And what I'm going to do is invite Dr. Amy Miner to join us again.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you're exhausted after doing that dance just now. That was wonderful. Thanks, everyone. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So I've also created a handout for you in the packet of information that summarizes all of the standards. But let's just review real quickly what we've done for drama and theater. So Tamara taught us how to make a bee puppet and encouraged us to create a scene or a play or a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and to create a character through movement, literally and symbolically, gesture, sound, and expression. Also, use this as an opportunity to identify similarities between story and your students' personal experiences. Let's look at the next one. We just experienced with dance lots of different kinds of movement and in this case, inspired by what we've learned about bees. Notice how we learned about moving our body shapes that show contrast: fast, slow, peanut butter, smooth. She showed us how to move body parts one at a time and in a variety of combinations, which demonstrated locomotor and non-locomotor movements. Let's move to music. Samantha did a great job teaching us about the concepts of beat and rhythm specifically, and she talked to us about lots of different activities that we could do to teach students different kinds of rhythm patterns. We also listened to Flight of the Bumblebee and think about the different contrasting music that we could compare that with, the steady beats, the patterns, and the expressive elements in that piece of music. I love to encourage students as they're listening to music to also think about, how does this make you feel? What kind of emotions are described in the music? And we had a great example of that with Samantha. And visual arts, I wanted to just celebrate all the different things that Elisa did, both in making the hexagon book with us, as well as showing us the different types of lettering. And the book showed us lots of different kinds of art techniques and elements. So I loved the way in the book that we saw A to Z descriptive and expressive words teaching us about informational text around bees. It was beautiful, and the illustrations are absolutely amazing. I also loved how in the illustrations they were using different kinds of materials and tools to create works of art. And Elisa also talked about that with the different types of lettering and the ways that we can connect the lettering and the way that we're having students draw their own illustrations and add words to their text that create works of art. I also love the brainstorming of different approaches with different materials that explore interests, questions, and curiosity. And I really wanted to emphasize that some of the things that Elisa talked about encourage us to create learning environments that support and sustain student self-esteem and self-respect. As we wrap up, there's a couple other things that were mentioned throughout all of the different presentations today. Go ahead and move to that next slide. And this just becomes a wonderful example of how we can, through integrating the arts with our academic core, bring in additional student success skills, student well-being, and even character education. We noticed lots of different opportunities, both with the bees, actual hexagon, and the book that Elisa taught us about with engineering design. So lots of creativity, lots of opportunities to collaborate, to communicate, to innovate. I love how we can learn more about bees and their reflection of responsibility and resilience to the hive. And as we think about this, what we're creating is deep learning, opportunities for students to apply and transfer what they know in one content area with what they're learning in another content area. When we do that, we have learning that we refer to as sticky learning. And that seems to apply especially with our learning about the bees. So thanks, everyone. Heading back to you, Tamara.
Thanks so much. Elisa's going to join us again, and she is going to lead us through the art sharing.
Yes, so right now, really quickly, if you still want to share, grab that QR code and scan it, or grab the link from the chat. I'm going to go ahead and change our screen though and share with you the Padlet. If you've been adding things there, you're going to see all the pictures, but if you haven't, you might be surprised to see all of the amazing things you guys have been creating. So sometimes when you're in a webinar, we can feel kind of isolated. We're all in different places across the whole state and beyond the state. It's really fun to see that you guys have really been creating some great stuff in your own homes and wherever you are. I have really enjoyed seeing that you tried all the kinds of lettering. I love the puppets, and I've noticed quite a few puppets where people use their own resources from home. So this bee puppet was made with a sheet of foam, which is awesome. And we have, this person was able to really quickly make a whole book about the plant cycle. I'm loving the illustration or the writing that has a picture drawn with it. So fantastic. Check out this fuzzy bee made with some home resources. Love it. So we will share the link to this Padlet. It may not be something you'll show your students, but it's always fun to kind of look back, awesome, and see what other people have created to sort of get you a little bit motivated when you're going to do this with your students. Tamara, is there anything you want me to highlight or take a look at a little bit closer? Oh, look at these words, just a second. I think I can make that a little bit bigger. I love the color here, the use of bee colors. So great. Look at this person added some cut paper on the front cover of the book. It's an awesome idea. Okay, keep adding information here and we'll share this out with everybody a little bit later. So Tamara, thanks. Back to you.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Just two quick things to wrap everything up for tonight's webinar. We really do love to see what you're doing, and we really want to know what you're doing with your students. If you're able to take these skills and knowledge back and implement them with your students. If you send us a photo of what you do with knowledge gained from this workshop with your students by June 1st, we'll put you in a drawing for a $50 Amazon gift cards. And we'll send you a reminder about that. And finally, we have a survey for you to take. We really want to know what we can do to do better, and if you liked what you saw in tonight's webinar. So we're going to put a link in the chat right now for you. And remember, go ahead and fill out that survey so that we can send you a certificate of completion for your relicensure points for this evening's webinar. Great. And we are going to stay online for a little bit to give you a chance to complete the survey. But I'll turn off my camera and chat. But we want to thank you all for attending tonight's webinar, Honeybee A to Z, and wish you all a good night. Thank you so much.